The dust storm that rolled into Rawhide, Nevada, that August morning in 1882 carried more than just grit and tumbleweeds. It carried Zinnia Crawford's last hope wrapped in a flour sack tied to her waist. She knelt in the scrubland east of town, her fingers working quickly through the sage and rabbit brush, plucking the wild herbs her mother had taught her to identify before the fever took her 6 months back. Yarrow for healing, wild mint for stomach ailments, chamomile growing stubborn and low against the earth. Each stem she added to her collection might fetch a penny or two from the general store, and she needed at least 40 cents by sundown or Mrs. Garrett would throw her belongings into the street. The sun climbed higher, turning the Nevada basin into a furnace. Sweat traced lines through the dust on Zinnia's face, but she kept working, kept searching. At 22 years old, she had survived worse than heat. She had survived her father's death in a mining accident when she was 16, her mother's slow decline, and the winter that nearly starved her. She would survive this too, even if her hands trembled from hunger and her vision blurred at the edges. That is some dedicated foraging. The voice startled her so badly she dropped a handful of sage. A man sat astride a buckskin horse not 15 feet away, and Zinnia had no idea how long he had been watching. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in summer. Dust covered his clothes, marking him as someone who had been riding hard, and a well-worn colt rested at his hip. Everything about him spoke of competence and danger in equal measure. "Did not mean to scare you," he said, swinging down from his horse with easy grace. "Name is Zachary Wilde. Just rode in from Carson City." Zinnia stood, clutching her sack protectively. She was tall for a woman but still had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "These herbs are spoken for. I am selling them in town." "I did not say otherwise." His voice was gentle, almost amused. "You look about ready to collapse, though. When did you last eat?" "That is none of your concern." Pride made her voice sharper than she intended. She could feel her cheeks burning, and it had nothing to do with the heat. Zachary studied her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. It was not pity exactly, but recognition, like he understood what desperation tasted like. "How much do you usually get for a haul like that?" 40 cents if I am lucky. 30 if Mr. Peterson is in one of his moods. "I will give you $5 for the lot." Zinnia stared at him. $5 was more money than she had seen in 3 months. It was enough for rent, for food, for the fabric she needed to mend her only other dress. It was too much. "Why would you do that?" "Because I need herbs for my ranch. Got men who could use some doctoring, and the Sawbones in town charges a fortune for house calls." He reached into his vest pocket and produced a leather wallet, counting out bills that looked impossibly crisp and new. "Besides, seems like you could use a bit of luck." Her throat tightened. Charity always came with strings, with expectations. She had learned that lesson hard and young. "I do not need your pity." "Good, because I am not offering any." He held out the money, and when she did not take it immediately, he smiled. It transformed his whole face, turning him from dangerous to something far more complicated. "Tell you what, sell me the herbs and then let me buy you lunch at the hotel. I have been eating trail dust for 3 days, and I could use some conversation that does not come from my horse. I should get back to town." "To do what?" "You said you were planning to sell these herbs. Well, I am buying them. That business is concluded. Now I am asking if you would share a meal with me. 2 separate transactions." Zinnia hesitated, but her stomach made the decision for her, growling loud enough that Zachary definitely heard it. His smile widened, and she found herself smiling back despite everything. "1 meal. Then I have things to attend to." "Fair enough." The ride back to Rawhide on the back of his horse felt surreal. Zinnia sat behind the saddle, acutely aware of every place her body touched his, the solid warmth of him, the way he smelled like leather and sage, and something else she could not name. They did not speak during the short journey, but the silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. The hotel dining room was the fanciest place Zinnia had been in years. White tablecloths, actual napkins, a menu written in careful script on a chalkboard. She felt desperately out of place in her faded calico and dusty boots, but Zachary did not seem to notice or care. He ordered enough food for 3 people and then leaned back in his chair, watching her with those steady eyes. "So tell me about these herbs," he said. "How did you learn to identify them, my mother?" The words came easier than she expected. She was a healer of sorts. People would come to her when they could not afford the doctor, or when the doctor could not help them. She knew every plant that grew in these hills, what they were good for, how to prepare them. Sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Zinnia took a careful sip of water from the glass in front of her, trying not to gulp it down like she wanted to. "She taught me everything. Said a woman should have skills, should be able to take care of herself. She was right about that." The food arrived in abundance. Roast beef and potatoes, fresh bread with butter, green beans that must have cost a fortune this time of year. Zinnia tried to eat slowly, with manners, but she was so hungry the edges of the room kept going dark. Zachary ate steadily, but she noticed he pushed the basket of bread closer to her side of the table, that he made sure her water glass stayed full. "You said you have a ranch?" she asked, desperate to fill the silence with something other than the sound of her eating. "About 10 miles north. The Broken Arrow. My father started it 20 years back, but he passed last winter. Now it is just me and the hands trying to make it through another season." He buttered a piece of bread with careful precision. "We run cattle mostly, some horses. It is good land, but it is hard work. Everything worth doing is hard work." He looked up at that, meeting her eyes across the table. "That is the truth. Where are you staying in town?" "A boarding house on 3rd Street. Mrs. Garrett rents rooms by the week." "And after you pay her with the money I gave you, how much will you have left?" Zinnia set down her fork. "Are you planning to offer me more charity, Mr. Wilde?" "Because I already told you what I am planning," he interrupted, his voice taking on a quality that made her breath catch, "is to offer you a job. A real one with real pay. I need someone at the ranch who knows about healing, both for the men and the animals. Someone who can cook decent food, keep the house in order, manage supplies. My foreman is good with cattle, but he cannot boil water without burning it, and we have had 3 men quit because the living conditions were so poor. You want to hire me as a housekeeper. I want to hire you as a partner in keeping that ranch running. $25 a month, room and board included. You would have your own quarters, complete privacy. I am not asking for anything improper." He leaned forward, and the intensity in his eyes made her heart pound. "But I am asking you to stay. Come out to the Broken Arrow, see the place, see if it suits you. If it does not, I will pay you for a week's work and bring you back to town myself." It was too much, too fast. Men did not just offer women jobs like this, not without expecting something in return. And yet everything about Zachary Wilde seemed genuine, from the calluses on his hands to the dust on his boots. He was a working man, not a smooth-talking gambler. And God help her, she wanted to say yes, wanted it with a fierceness that shocked her. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You do not know anything about me. I know you were out in that heat doing whatever it took to survive. I know you have skills that are valuable, and I know that when I offered you charity, you looked ready to spit in my eye." His smile was crooked, almost shy. "That is the kind of pride that makes for good partners. people who work for what they have. Zinnia thought about the boarding house, about the endless cycle of gathering and selling for pennies, about the way Mrs. Garrett looked at her like she was one bad week away from soliciting on the streets. She thought about her mother's voice telling her that a woman needed skills, needed to be able to take care of herself. Maybe this was how she did that. "I want to see the place first," she said. "And I want your word that you will bring me back to town the moment I ask, no questions." "You have it." He offered his hand across the table, and when she took it, his grip was warm and firm and solid as bedrock. "We can leave whenever you are ready. I need to collect my things from the boarding house and settle up with Mrs. Garrett. I will come with you, Mrs. Garrett's face when Zinnia walked in with Zachary Wilde behind her was worth every humiliation the woman had heaped on her over the past months. The landlady's eyes went wide, taking in the tall cowboy with his confident stance and the way he looked at Zinnia like she mattered. "Mrs. Garrett, I am here to collect my belongings and pay what I owe. You are leaving." The woman sounded almost panicked, probably calculating how long it would take to rent the room to someone else. "I have secured employment at the Broken Arrow Ranch." Zinnia counted out the money carefully, taking deep satisfaction in being able to pay in full. "Thank you for your hospitality." Her belongings fit into a single worn carpetbag. One change of clothes, her mother's herb journal, a tin daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day, and a chipped china cup that had belonged to her grandmother. Everything she owned in the world could be carried in one hand. Zachary took the bag from her without comment, and they walked back out into the brilliant Nevada sunshine together. The ride to the Broken Arrow took 2 hours, heading north into country that grew gradually more beautiful as they climbed out of the basin. Cottonwoods lined a creek that ran year-round, Zachary explained, fed by springs higher in the mountains. The grass grew thick and green near the water, gold and dry farther out where cattle grazed in the distance like rust-colored clouds against the landscape. The ranch house itself was bigger than Zinnia expected, built from rough-hewn logs and native stone with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. It was clearly old, showing the wear of 2 decades of harsh weather, but the bones were good. Someone had built it to last. "It needs work," Zachary said as he helped her down from the horse, his hands spanning her waist for one brief moment that made her skin tingle. "My mother died when I was young, and my father never had much talent for keeping house. The past year since he has been gone, it has gotten worse." The interior confirmed his words. Dust covered every surface, dishes were stacked in the basin, and the whole place had the neglected air of a space where men ate and slept but never actually lived. Still, Zinnia could see the potential. The main room had a massive stone fireplace, good windows that let in light, a solid wood table that could seat a dozen people. The kitchen had a real stove, a pump that brought water right into the house, and enough storage space for serious cooking. "Let me show you where you would stay," Zachary said, leading her down a short hallway. He opened a door onto a room that was small but private, with a real bed frame, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "This was my mother's sewing room. My father could never bring himself to use it for anything else, but I think she would like knowing someone was living in it again." Zinnia set her carpetbag on the bed, running her hand over the faded quilt. The room smelled like cedar and dust, and faintly of lavender, as though the ghost of herbs still lingered in the wood. She could be happy here. The thought came unbidden and certain. "I will stay," she said, turning to face him, "on a trial basis. 1 month. If it is working for both of us at the end of that time, we can discuss a longer arrangement." The relief on his face was so genuine it made her chest ache. "That is more than fair. I will introduce you to the men at supper, and we can work out the details of your duties tomorrow. For now, why do not you settle in, maybe rest a bit? You have had a long day." After he left, Zinnia sat on the bed and let herself shake. She had done it. She had walked away from town, from everything familiar, and taken a chance on a stranger. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, and she had no idea if she had just made the best or worst decision of her life. The sun was setting when she finally emerged from her room, following the sound of voices to the bunkhouse behind the main house. 6 men were gathered there, ranging from a grizzled old-timer to a kid who could not have been more than 17. They all stopped talking when she appeared, staring at her with expressions that ranged from curious to suspicious. Zachary materialized at her elbow, his presence solid and reassuring. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Crawford. She will be managing the house and handling any medical needs that come up. I expect you all to treat her with respect and give her whatever help she needs." "Madam," the old-timer said, touching his hat brim. "Name is Henry Cooper. I am the foreman here. Good to have someone civilized around the place." The others introduced themselves in turn. There was Patrick Sullivan, young and eager with red hair and freckles. Miguel Santos, quiet and watchful with scarred hands that spoke of hard work. Brothers named Tom and Jack Henderson, who looked so alike Zinnia knew she would have trouble telling them apart. And Luther Price, middle-aged and dour, who looked at her like she was an intruder. "I hope I can be useful to you all," Zinnia said, keeping her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered. "I know my way around injuries and illnesses, and I promise I can cook better than whatever you have been eating." That got a few chuckles, and some of the tension eased. They drifted toward the main house for supper, and Zinnia saw with dismay that Zachary had not been exaggerating about the food situation. The meal was beans that had been cooked into near mush, cornbread so dry it could have been used for building material, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. "I will take over cooking starting tomorrow," she announced, and this time the relief on all their faces was comical. That night, lying in her new bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her, Zinnia thought about the strange turn her life had taken. This morning she had been desperate and alone, and now she was living on a working ranch with 7 men she did not know. It should have felt dangerous, but somehow it did not. Maybe it was the way Zachary had looked at her across the table at lunch, like she was someone worth paying attention to. Or maybe it was the solid feeling of the house around her, the sense of purpose that came with having real work to do. She fell asleep thinking about creek water eyes and the warmth of hands on her waist. The first week at the Broken Arrow passed in a blur of work that left Zinnia exhausted but satisfied. She woke before dawn to start bread rising, made proper breakfasts of eggs and bacon and potatoes, packed lunches for the men to take out to wherever they were working. She scrubbed floors and walls, beat rugs until her arms ached, organized the chaos of the kitchen into something functional. In the afternoons, she walked the property, identifying the wild herbs that grew there and transplanting some to a small garden plot near the kitchen door. Zachary was everywhere and nowhere, working alongside his men but always seeming to appear when Zinnia needed something. He fixed the pump when it started leaking, brought her fresh meat from a deer he shot, showed her where supplies were stored. They did not talk much during those first days, but she was constantly aware of him, of the way he moved through space with that easy confidence, of the sound of his voice drifting in through open windows. On her 8th day at the ranch, young Patrick came limping back from the range with a gash on his leg from a tangle with barbed wire. Zinnia sat him down at the kitchen table and examined the wound with careful hands, cleaning it with whiskey that made him hiss and bite his lip. "This needs stitching," she said. I can do it if you trust me, or we can wait for the doctor to come out from town." "You do it, Miss Crawford," Patrick said, his face pale but determined. "I have seen my share of stitches. I trust you will make them neat." She had helped her mother stitch wounds dozens of times, but doing it herself was different. Her hands trembled slightly as she threaded the needle, but once she started, muscle memory took over. Patrick gritted his teeth but did not cry out, and when she finished, the wound was closed in a neat line of even stitches. "That is fine work," Zachary said from the doorway, and Zinnia jumped. She had not heard him come in. "Where did you learn to do that, my mother?" She said a healer had to be able to handle blood without fainting. She cleaned her hands in the basin, trying to steady her breathing. "He should stay off it for a few days, keep it clean and dry." "You heard her, Patrick. Light duty for the rest of the week." After the young man limped off to the bunkhouse, Zachary lingered in the kitchen, watching as Zinnia checked the bread in the oven. The heat from the stove made her face flush, or maybe it was the intensity of his gaze. "You have been worth every penny and then some," he said quietly. "The men are happier, the house actually feels like a home, and you just proved you can handle a medical emergency without falling apart. I am grateful you decided to stay. It has only been a week. You might change your mind." "I will not." He moved closer, and suddenly the kitchen felt very small. "Zinnia, I want you to know that this is working exactly as I hoped it would. You belong here." The words settled into her chest like warm honey. She had not belonged anywhere since her mother died, had been adrift and alone for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something. "I am glad I came," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. "Good." His smile was soft, intimate in a way that made her breath catch. "Because I am going to be very disappointed if you decide to leave at the end of the month." He left her standing there, her heart racing and her mind spinning. Something was happening between them, something that had nothing to do with business arrangements or employment. She could feel it building like summer heat before a storm, electric and inevitable. The second week brought a crisis that tested all of them. A section of fence went down in the north pasture, and half the herd got mixed up with cattle from the neighboring ranch. It took 3 days of hard riding to sort them out, and the men came back exhausted and filthy. Zinnia had hot water and clean towels ready, stew simmering on the stove, and fresh bread cooling on the counter. The gratitude on their faces made all the work worthwhile. She was cleaning up after supper when Zachary came in from checking the horses. He moved like a man who had been in the saddle too long, stiff and slow, and when he reached up to hang his hat, he winced. "You are hurt," Zinnia said, abandoning the dishes. "Just sore. Nothing to fuss about." "Sit down and let me see." He started to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him. He sank into a chair at the table, and Zinnia moved behind him, gently probing his shoulders and back. The muscles were knotted like rope, hard and unyielding under her fingers. "When did you last have a full night's sleep?" she asked, working her thumbs into the worst of the knots. "I do not remember," he admitted. "Running this place is a full-time job and then some. You cannot take care of the ranch if you do not take care of yourself." She kept working, feeling the tension slowly ease under her hands. "You need to eat more, sleep more, let yourself rest occasionally." "Yes, madam," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Are you going to start mothering me now? Someone needs to." She moved to his other shoulder, and he let his head drop forward, giving her better access. The intimacy of touching him like this, of having him trust her with his pain, made her hyper-aware of every breath, every small sound he made. "Besides, I have a vested interest in keeping my employer healthy." "Is that all I am? Your employer?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Zinnia's hand stilled on his shoulders, and she felt him tense, waiting for her answer. "I do not know," she said honestly. "What do you want to be?" He turned in the chair, catching her hands in his, looking up at her with those steady eyes that saw too much. "I want to be the man you think about before you fall asleep at night. I want to be the reason you smile when you think no one is watching. I want to be the person you trust with your secrets, your fears, your dreams." His voice was rough, almost desperate. "I know it has only been 2 weeks. I know this is too fast, too soon. But Zinnia, I have not been able to stop thinking about you since that first day in the scrubland. You were so fierce, so determined, and I knew right then that you were someone special." Her heart was thundering so hard she could barely breathe. "Zachary, you do not have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know how I feel, what I am hoping for. If you need time, I understand. If you do not feel the same way, I can live with that. But I could not keep pretending this was just about business anymore." She looked down at their joined hands, his large and work roughened, hers smaller but just as scarred. Two people who knew what it meant to fight for survival, to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. "I think about you all the time," she whispered. "I tell myself it is foolish, that I barely know you, but then you do something kind or you smile at me a certain way, and I forget all the reasons I should be careful." He stood slowly, still holding her hands, bringing them up between their bodies. "Then do not be careful. Take a chance on this. On us. What if it does not work? What if I lose this job, this place that is starting to feel like home? You will not lose anything, I promise. But Zinnia, what if it does work? What if this is the start of something neither of us saw coming but both of us need?" She let herself look at him, really look. The strong lines of his face, the kindness in his eyes, the set of his shoulders that spoke of a man who would stand beside you through whatever came. He was not offering her charity or asking for anything she did not want to give. He was offering partnership, possibility, hope. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I want to try." His smile was brilliant, transforming his whole face. He raised her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a gentleness that made tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." They stood there in the warm kitchen, the lamp light flickering, the world narrowed down to just the two of them and the promise hanging in the air between them. Zinnia knew this was a turning point, that her life would be divided into before and after this moment. She thought of her mother, of the lessons about being independent and taking care of herself, and realized this was not giving up her independence. This was choosing to share it with someone worthy. The third week brought a routine that felt both comfortable and charged with new tension. Zachary found reasons to be in the house more often, helping with repairs, bringing her things she needed, stealing moments of conversation that left her flushed and smiling. The men noticed, she could tell, but they seemed more amused than bothered by it. Henry, the foreman, even winked at her once, whispering that it was about time the boss found someone to take his mind off work. On Sunday, Zachary asked if she wanted to go riding with him to check on the line shacks in the high country. It was clear the invitation was about more than ranch business, and Zinnia accepted with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The ride up into the mountains was spectacular. They followed the creek higher, through stands of aspen that whispered in the breeze and meadows filled with late summer wildflowers. Zinnia pointed out herbs as they passed, explaining their uses, and Zachary listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was really paying attention. "My mother used to say that the land provides everything we need if we know how to look," Zinnia said as they paused to let the horses drink. "People think healers have some kind of magic, but it is just knowledge passed down, observation, patience." "Your mother sounds like she was an amazing woman." She was. Zinnia dismounted, kneeling beside the water to splash her face. I miss her every single day. She was my teacher, my friend, my compass. When she died, I felt completely lost. Zachary swung down from his horse, coming to sit beside her on the creek bank. My father was the same for me. He taught me everything about ranching, about being a man. The day he died, I realized I had never told him how much I loved him, how grateful I was for everything he gave me. She looked at him, saw the grief still fresh in his eyes, and took his hand. I think they know. Somehow, I think the people we love know what we feel even if we never say the words. I hope so. He squeezed her hand, then pulled her gently closer. But I also learned something from losing him. Life is short and unpredictable. We should not wait to tell people what they mean to us. What are you saying? I am saying that I am falling in love with you, Zinnia Crawford. Maybe I started falling that first day when you looked ready to fight me for a sack of herbs. Maybe it happened when I saw you stitch up Patrick without flinching, or when you stood up to Luther when he complained about supper, or in one of 100 small moments I have been collecting like treasures. But it is happening, and I do not want to pretend otherwise. The words hung in the air, huge and terrifying and wonderful. Zinnia felt tears spill over, tracking down her cheeks, but she was smiling. I am falling in love with you too, she said, voice shaking. I tried not to. I told myself it was too fast, too risky. But then you look at me like I am the most important thing in your world, and I cannot help it. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. Can I kiss you, please? His lips were warm and gentle on hers, questioning at first, then more certain as she responded. Zinnia had been kissed before, clumsy stolen moments with boys who did not matter, but this was entirely different. This was heat and promise and rightness, like coming home after a long journey. She wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back with all the pent-up longing of the past weeks, and felt him smile against her mouth. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. That was worth waiting for. It was, she agreed, laughing a little at the wonder in his voice. Though I would not mind doing it again. That can definitely be arranged. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the high meadow, talking about everything and nothing. Zachary told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build it into something that would last for generations. Zinnia talked about her hopes to establish a real healing practice, to help people the way her mother had. They made plans together, tentative and excited about what their future might look like. By the time they rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, everything had changed. They were no longer employer and employee, no longer strangers taking a chance. They were two people building something together, and the potential of it was dizzying. The fourth week brought challenges that tested their new relationship. A late summer storm flooded part of the creek, taking out a section of pasture fence. 2 of the horses came down with colic, requiring round-the-clock care. Luther finally revealed the source of his surliness, admitting he had been sweet on a girl in town who married someone else, and Zinnia spent an evening talking him through his heartbreak over cups of strong coffee. Through it all, Zachary was her constant. He worked from before dawn until after dark, but he always found time to seek her out, to steal a kiss in the barn, to hold her hand while they watched the sun set from the porch. The other men pretended not to notice, but Zinnia caught their knowing smiles and did not care. Let them see that she was happy. Let the whole world know. On the last day of her trial month, Zachary asked her to take a walk with him after supper. They headed toward the creek, following a path worn smooth by years of use. The evening was perfect, warm but not hot, with a breeze carrying the scent of sage and grass. So, he said, taking her hand as they walked, your month is up. Do you want to stay? That depends. Are you still offering me the job? He stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression so serious it made her heart skip. I am offering you a lot more than a job, Zinnia. I am offering you a home, a future, a partnership in every sense of the word. He took both her hands, holding them tight. I want to marry you. I know it is fast. I know people will talk, but I do not care. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? She should have been surprised, but she was not. Everything between them had been building to this moment, inevitable as sunrise. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed her right there by the creek, deep and thorough, and when he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy. You already do. She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. You gave me hope when I had none, a place to belong and your heart. How could I not love you? They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when they announced their engagement to the men, the response was enthusiastic and immediate. Henry produced a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion. Miguel started planning a feast. Even Luther managed a genuine smile, clasping Zachary on the shoulder and telling him he was a lucky man. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Zinnia thought about the strange path that had brought her here. If someone had told her a month ago that she would be engaged to a rancher, living in the most beautiful place she had ever seen, surrounded by people who felt like family, she would have thought they were mad. But life had a way of surprising you, of offering chances when you least expected them. She thought of her mother, of the lessons about independence and strength, and realized she had not lost those things by falling in love. She had found someone who valued them, who saw her skills and her determination as assets rather than threats. Zachary did not want to tame her or diminish her. He wanted to stand beside her and watch her flourish. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. The circuit preacher happened to be passing through Rawhide, and Zachary convinced him to make the trip out to the Broken Arrow. Zinnia wore a new dress that she had sewn herself from soft blue calico, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Zachary had picked that morning. The ceremony itself was short, just the preacher reading the vows while the ranch hands stood as witnesses. But when Zachary slipped a simple gold band on her finger and said, "I do," with such fierce certainty, Zinnia felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was what her mother had wanted for her, not just survival but happiness, not just independence but partnership. The celebration afterward was raucous and joyful. Miguel had outdone himself with food, creating a feast that seemed impossible given their basic kitchen. There was music, someone having produced a fiddle from somewhere, and dancing on the porch as the stars came out overhead. Zinnia danced with all the men, laughing until her sides hurt, but it was Zachary she kept coming back to, Zachary whose arms felt like home. Late in the evening, after the men had drifted off to the bunkhouse, Zachary led her inside to the bedroom they would now share. Someone, probably Henry, had hung wildflowers around the doorframe and fresh linens scented with lavender covered the bed. "Are you nervous?" Zachary asked, closing the door behind them. "A little," Zinnia admitted. "But I trust you." He crossed to her slowly, taking her hands. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. We can just sleep, talk, whatever you want." She loved him for offering, but she did not want to wait. "I want this. I want you." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Zinnia felt the last of her nervousness melt away. This was right. This was good. This was the beginning of the rest of their lives. He was gentle with her, patient, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. And when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like two pieces of a puzzle finally finding their proper place. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Zinnia felt more content than she ever had in her life. Zachary's hand traced lazy patterns on her back, and his heartbeat was steady under her ear. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for gathering herbs that day. Thank you for being stubborn and proud and willing to take a chance on a strange cowboy. Thank you for buying them all and asking me to stay." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Zinnia's last thought before drifting off was that she was finally, truly home. The first year of marriage was a learning curve for both of them. They learned each other's rhythms, how to fight fair and make up thoroughly, how to balance the demands of the ranch with the needs of their relationship. Zinnia expanded her herb garden, and word spread through the territory about the healer at the Broken Arrow. People started showing up with ailments, and she treated them all, accepting whatever payment they could offer. Zachary was endlessly proud of her, bragging to anyone who would listen about his brilliant wife. He supported her work completely, even building her a dedicated space in one of the outbuildings where she could dry herbs and prepare medicines without being underfoot in the kitchen. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Zinnia's careful accounting revealed ways to save money and increase efficiency. Zachary's hard work and good instincts meant the herd grew steadily. They hired 2 more hands, expanding operations carefully and sustainably. But the best part was the small moments. Coffee together on the porch at sunrise, working side by side in the garden, the way Zachary would catch her around the waist and dance with her in the kitchen for no reason. The nights when they would lie in bed talking about their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. In the spring of their second year together, Zinnia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not said anything until she was certain. When she finally told Zachary, he picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down gently like she might break. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she said, laughing at the stricken look on his face. I know, but Zinnia, we are having a baby. We are going to be parents." The wonder in his voice made her throat tight. "Are you happy about it?" "Terrified," she admitted, "and thrilled, and nervous, and about a dozen other things all at once." He pulled her close, resting a hand over her still flat stomach. "We are going to be good at this. I know we are." The pregnancy was mostly easy, though Zinnia resented being relegated to lighter duties as she grew larger. Zachary was annoyingly overprotective, and the ranch hands were not much better, all of them treating her like she might shatter. She bore it with as much grace as she could muster, reminding herself they were coming from a place of love. Their son was born on a cold November night with Henry attending as midwife, the old foreman having delivered more calves and foals than he could count. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Zinnia thought she could not do it. But Zachary never left her side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Zinnia felt a wave of love so intense it took her breath away. They named him Zane, and he had his father's eyes and his mother's determination, making his preferences known from the very start. Zachary was besotted, spending hours just watching the baby sleep, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. "We made this," he would say in wonder. "We made this perfect little person." Being parents was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. They took turns with night feedings, both of them stumbling around half awake. The ranch hands were surprisingly helpful, taking on extra duties so Zinnia could focus on the baby, occasionally even volunteering to watch him so she and Zachary could have a few hours to themselves. Zane grew quickly, a happy baby who rarely fussed unless he was hungry or needed changing. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything. his curious nature leading him to explore every corner of the ranch. Zinnia had to watch him constantly, terrified he would hurt himself, but Zachary reminded her that children were tougher than they looked. He is going to fall down. He is going to get bumps and scrapes, but he is also going to learn and grow and become his own person. We have to let him. She knew he was right, but it did not make it any easier to watch her son take risks. When Zane was 2, Zinnia discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, with more sickness and fatigue, but she refused to slow down completely. The ranch needed her, her patients needed her, and she needed the sense of purpose that came from working. Their daughter was born in early summer, arriving so fast that Zachary barely had time to fetch Henry. They named her Zara, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's easy smile. Where Zane had been serious and focused even as a baby, Zara was all charm and mischief, wrapping everyone around her tiny finger from day one. "We are outnumbered," Zachary said one evening, watching Zane teach his sister how to stack blocks while she promptly knocked them down, giggling. 2 against 2, it is going to be chaos." "It already is chaos," Zinnia said, but she was smiling. This was not the life she had imagined for herself that day in the scrubland, desperate and alone. This was so much better, so much richer and fuller and more beautiful than she had ever dared to dream. The years rolled on, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. There were hard winters when the snow piled high and they worried about the cattle. There were dry summers when the creek ran low and water had to be rationed carefully. There were illnesses and accidents, losses that hurt and victories that were celebrated. Through it all, Zinnia and Zachary faced everything together. They taught their children to work hard, to value education, to treat everyone with respect regardless of their station. Zane grew into a serious young man who loved the land as much as his father did, learning everything he could about ranching. Zara was more like her mother, fascinated by the healing arts and constantly asking questions about herbs and medicines. On their 10th anniversary, Zachary took Zinnia back to the meadow where he had first kissed her. The children were staying with Henry for the night, giving them rare time alone. They rode up in comfortable silence, hands occasionally brushing as they guided their horses. The meadow was as beautiful as she remembered, wildflowers turning it into a carpet of color. They dismounted and walked to the creek, sitting in the same spot where he had told her he was falling in love with her all those years ago. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked, taking her hand. "Saying yes that day, giving up your independence to tie your life to mine?" Zinnia looked at him, at the man who had bought her herbs and asked her to stay, who had seen her potential when she could barely see it herself. "I did not give up my independence. I chose how to use it. I chose you, this life, our family, and I would choose it again every single time." He kissed her, soft and sweet, and she tasted 10 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. "I am the luckiest man alive," he whispered against her lips. "We are both lucky," she corrected. "We found each other when we needed it most, and we built something lasting." They stayed in the meadow until the sun began to set, talking about the past and the future, about their hopes for their children and the ranch. Zinnia thought about the scared young woman she had been, gathering herbs to sell for pennies, and marveled at how far she had come. As they rode back to the ranch in the deepening twilight, Zinnia felt profound gratitude for the twists and turns that had led her here. She had learned that strength was not just about surviving alone, but about knowing when to accept help, when to take chances, when to open your heart despite the risk. The lights of the Broken Arrow glowed in the distance, warm and welcoming, and Zinnia urged her horse faster, suddenly eager to be home. Because that was what it was, what it had been since the day Zachary had asked her to stay. Not just a place, but a feeling, a promise, a forever. When they rode into the yard, Zane and Zara came running from the bunkhouse, Henry following at a more sedate pace. The children tackled their parents with hugs, talking over each other about everything they had done while they were gone. Zachary scooped up Zara while Zane grabbed Zinnia's hand, and they walked to the house together, a family whole and happy and complete. Later, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Zinnia stood on the porch looking out at the land she had come to love. Zachary came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against him with a contented sigh. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. That day we met, how scared I was, how certain I was that I had to do everything alone. And then you came along and showed me there was another way." "We showed each other," he corrected gently. "I was drowning in responsibility and grief, and you gave me a reason to hope again. You saved me as much as I saved you." She turned in his arms, looking up at him in the moonlight. "Then I guess we are even. I guess we are." They went inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility, and they would face it the way they had faced everything else in their 10 years together, with love, with partnership, with the absolute certainty that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. Zinnia thought of her mother one last time, of the lessons about independence and strength, and sent a silent thank you to the woman who had prepared her for this life. She had learned her lessons well, had used her skills and her determination to build something lasting. But she had also learned that true strength sometimes meant accepting love, taking risks, and trusting someone else with your heart. As she climbed into bed beside her husband, Zinnia knew with bone-deep certainty that she had made the right choice that day in the scrubland. She had gathered wild herbs to sell for pennies, and a cowboy had bought them all and asked her to stay. She had said yes, taking a leap of faith into the unknown, and it had led her here to this perfect, imperfect, beautiful life. She had found her home, her purpose, her love, and she would spend the rest of her days grateful for that chance encounter that had changed everything. The wind whispered through the cottonwoods outside, carrying the scent of sage and grass and home, and Zinnia fell asleep smiling, wrapped in the arms of the man who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. She had been lost, and now she was found. She had been alone, and now she had family. She had been surviving, and now she was truly living. And it had all started with wild herbs, a cowboy's kindness, and the courage to stay.